pardon me. Let me introduce Howard Lawrence. Howard is Director of Neighborhoods in the city of Edmonton. And before that, he initiated the Abundant Community Initiative in that city. It's illustrious because it is probably the city, and it's a large city, it's 1 million people, where they have developed a method that is growing and growing of getting every block to have a connector. We heard in an earlier session from one of those connectors telling us what kind of work she did and how she did it. And then also heard from a person who is a connector finder in Edmonton. They have people who have responsibility for maybe 50 blocks where they find connectors and continue to support and nurture them. We wanted to have Howard Lawrence go on and describe 2 other pieces of the puzzle that we think are important for people who want to take this kind of a path. So Howard, I know that in addition to the connectors and the connector finder nurturers, you also have another group of people that are significant in making this an effective initiative. And I wonder if you could introduce us to the nature of that group and what they do.
Sure. Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody, for your interest. You know, I'm going to share my screen. Is that all right? I'm going to hit screen share, and I'm going to pick a screen. Oh, I should have picked this screen. I'm going to pick this screen, and I'm going to share it with you, if you don't mind. And I'm going to go to present. Where's present? Let's see, present is probably over here under this. Present, there it is. Okay, so I'm assuming everybody can see my little slide bank. And one of the fun things about this slide bank is this was produced by my colleague, one of the colleagues here. So it says a lot. It says that the municipalities actually creating this kind of material, which I think is significant. And I think it's even significant that it isn't, while at the bottom you can see City of Edmonton logo and Abundant Community. So City of Edmonton is our municipality. Abundant Community is in some senses our methodology. But I think the city rightfully has recognized that what we're really about here is just creating natural, organic, neighboring relationships. And so that's what that's about. And what we do a lot of is we draw attention to the fact that for a balanced relational diet, we actually use that kind of language. For a balanced relational diet, you need to have 3 nutrients, or it's really important to have 3 nutrients. One is family, the other is friendship, but oftentimes the missing nutrient is neighboring. So we frame it up that way. We say these are the 3 relationships that are important. And we particularly care about the neighboring relationship. We're glad that people care about the family relationship and even friendship. And then we try to be clear to say the friendship relationship oftentimes gets a lot more attention than the neighboring relationship. And that the friendship relationship, which is basically affinity based, while good, doesn't hold the same quality of nutrients that the neighboring relationship does. And so we want to enhance the neighboring relationship, and everybody agrees on it. We oftentimes will have fun asking people to remember or talk about a positive neighbor relationship. So something current. And then what we do sometimes is say, But if you can't remember, or if you don't have a current one, can you remember something from your past? And lots of times people will talk about their childhood and they'll talk about it fondly. And then we're really careful to say, now those weren't necessarily friendships. Those were a neighboring relationship.
Howard, are we supposed to, is there something supposed to be changing on the screen?
I'm going to change it right now.
Oh, I thought, okay, go ahead. Uh-huh.
So we talk a lot, and this is for our municipality and the municipalities we talk about. We again really focus on this. We try to say that there is a neighboring movement, that it's an actual movement. And all we're trying to do is facilitate the movement of the citizenry back into this neighboring relationship. That it's not something we're producing, but it's there already. And to do that and help with them to understand the texture of it a little bit, we show them this little advertisement for a coffee shop, a very, very famous coffee shop chain here in Canada, Tim Hortons. And maybe I'll show it to you. It's fun. And you can see why it works. Because we're trying to get at the benefit of neighboring. We're trying to get at the reluctance of people to neighbor today in our context. And we're also trying to demonstrate the value of the neighboring relationship juxtaposed against the family relationship and the friendship relationship. So let's see if we can play this. Let's just give it a whirl. Oh, no, that didn't work. I'm going to go back and see if we can start it.
I'm Andrew from Tim Hortons.
We're trying to figure out if people actually know their neighbors or not.
Okay.
We see each other in passing.
I don't know them at all. Would you be interested in having a cup of coffee with your neighbor? Right now? Yeah.
You have an accent. Where are you from?
I do. I'm English.
Oh, really?
It's interesting, eh?
Yeah.
You bringing coffee?
There you go,
thanks.
yeah.
How's it going?
So you just got home not long ago?
Yeah, I came a few hours ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
So,
What do you do for work?
I was just going to ask you. I work in sales.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How do you like the house?
Love the house. It's completely renovated.
I noticed. I mean, I was watching the whole thing go down, obviously.
It must have been really annoying for you.
So what do you do for fun?
Now, I mean, everything is kind of the kids. But
I just started my new job.
Where did you start working?
I'm a chef.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. I'm not quite that Canadian yet.
I don't know if I'm that Canadian yet. Like, I can't skate. I've never watched a hockey game in my life.
Why haven't we met sooner?
I know the mom life, the busy mom life. I know sometimes I see you
Struggling with my two.
right?
We have a barbecue this summer,
Definitely. I agree.
and I'll do the dessert.
I mean, maybe we'll have a coffee inside the house at some point.
Yeah,
When
definitely.
it's not -5, but
So next weekend, I'm going to Montreal with a girlfriend.
I'm going to Montreal too, actually.
Next weekend, getting to know your neighbors more than just knowing their name.
Typically, when I meet neighbors, first you got to do the hello from a distance.
We see each other, but we don't really talk or hang out.
When you actually take the time to start talking to somebody, it's amazing what you can find out that you have in common.
I'm from a different country, and I don't have a lot of family around me, so I consider my neighbors family.
Canada, gain a new friend, meet your neighbor. It's as simple as that.
So there you go, fun, eh? And you see so much is in there. You see the juxtaposing of neighbor relationship. You see the benefits of neighboring. You see the warming up when you just take the risk of connecting with neighbors. So we do that. And for the municipality and for others, we just are really saying, as you could see there was inclusion, there was bylaw enforcement. Did you hear the bylaw enforcement piece? When they were going, oh yeah, I saw your construction. You see supportive relationships, on and on it goes. And so we look at benefits of neighboring, and we've compiled, John certainly, and Jody and John and Peter have done lots around the competencies of a neighborhood. in the area of, children, environment, economy, all of those competencies of a neighborhood. And we just added to that, and we play with those pieces here, talking about them or reframing them and the benefits of neighboring. So, and these are all evidence-based, peer-reviewed papers supporting all of this. So we love to use this. And we would say building community in the neighborhood is the tide that floats all of these boats. So you should really pay attention. So we usually have a pretty good response from people. And I might even, when I'm presenting to a municipality or to an organization, and we do, like even today, I talked to a couple of other one in Scotland. We did a presentation for Scotland and for Florida. And we even talked to another person in Wichita today. And we say this is a good way to present to a municipality. And two of the ones that are really great is child maltreatment, 2019 on child maltreatment that talks about intergenerational closure as a protective factor for children. The abstract of that article says that child maltreatment is preventable. It makes that bold statement in the abstract, preventable. And then it goes on to talk about this notion of intergenerational closure, which is simply children knowing the names of adults on their block. So we talk about that. And then we also use Daniel Aldrich's work in terms of disaster preparedness and recovery, who makes this radical statement that the number one predictor of survival and recovery from a disaster is how well you know your neighbors. So just those two are reason enough for us to think of a method to connect neighbors with one another in a meaningful way. So that's what we do. I'm going to take a minute. So we shared a bunch of stuff to this part before we get into our methodology. Is there any questions about this kind of approach that we think works?
Howard, could you just say a few words? One of the benefits is a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Have you done any data collection around that kind of a question?
Yeah, great. So exactly, John. So all of these feel secondary to community building. And what we're saying is we have the research in place that says, if you know your neighbors, this will be the outcome. So what we've done is we've said, what's kind of the bottom line measurement that we as a municipality will need to take? And we're using the sense of community index that was designed and developed by Chavez out of New York. So we use that, and the city has wholeheartedly bought into that. If you were to see our 2050 plan, that is one of our measurements. So I think that actually is a very significant movement that we have made as a city to actually measure sense of community. So yeah, that's what we're using, and it is embedded in our future plan. Edmonton will not succeed unless it has an increasing sense of community, and basically it describes the neighborhood. And in fact, we put neighborhood increase in this belonging. We talked about that in the neighborhood is one of our goals as well, that we're getting at through sense of community as we structure it around community as neighborhood. That's another thing that we've done, John, just in that regard, because the word community can be such an abstraction, and we've had community services, we've had, we've used the word, like you recognize, community services. We've actually changed the name to neighborhood department to be clearer. We don't want to be washed up in the word community. We're actually saying neighborhood. And we use as an example a statement that our aging in place group in the city used at one time. And they used to say this, that seniors are respected in the community. And we said to them, well, no one's responsible if you say that. But if you say seniors are respected in the neighborhood, now there is a sense of responsibility. You'd say, well, is our neighborhood respecting seniors? Who are our seniors? Does anybody have a list of our seniors? Have we had a meeting about seniors? So these are all little factors that we have, put into place.
Great.
Howard, I'm sorry. I just want to be really clear. So really is the neighborhood is exclusively the way Edmonton is measuring belonging?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Howard, why do you keep it that narrow?
Because we see the neighborhood in the same way as the family. It's a supportive social unit. So it's down through history and across societies, the village or the neighborhood has been a supportive social unit in the same way that the family has. And outside of that, we really don't see another organic arrangement. Friendships are lovely, but they're not of the same quality as a neighborhood. And there's two dimensions. One is a neighborhood is incredibly inclusive in every way. A neighborhood is bounded so that no one gets left behind, whereas friendships, which is, I'm sometimes would say that our society, the Western world, is addicted to friendships. We love them and we build our lives around friendships and it's natural that we would, because we're finding people who are like us. And we celebrate when we find somebody that's the same height, skin color, this, that, and the other thing that's just like us, except for we want them to be slightly richer, slightly better looking, and slightly smarter than us. And so we build these friendships, and that's what we call community. It's affinity based. So we actually address the importance of friendship while we say affinity within proximity. So we recognize that affinity groups we want affinity within proximity, but we want to take away the massive commercialization of friendship, market level friendship, where you shop for a new friend for your son across town. We're saying, no, what you have in your neighborhood is enough. So affinity within proximity.
Well, you wanted to go ahead, so.
All right, I'm going to, just a sec here. We're on Zoom and I've got a Hangout thing going here that I have to get rid of. There we go. And I am going to get back into my slide set. All right. So our Edmonton context, this is a slide from today. We say two things about our Edmonton context that we think are important. So when we say the neighborhood is the supportive social unit, it can't be just any neighborhood. It has to be, we use the language around human scale. So we say it's got to be a human scale neighborhood. Now we inherited in Edmonton human scale neighborhoods, which I think most of the literature, and Emily Talon in her new book, Neighborhoods, I think I even had the book earlier, this book. I can really recommend it, especially when this is a book to be proud to present to your city planners. And she talks about the everyday neighborhood. It's nice and concise, and it just talks about the human scaleness of a neighborhood. I think she would talk about the fact that historically urban planners built around the scale of an elementary school. The idea was that you would have a catchment of an elementary school and that you would have amenities generally for that. And then there would be the regionalization of certain amenities that a neighborhood couldn't sustain by itself. A junior high, for instance. So Edmonton has the human scale neighborhood. The other thing that we have that is we have a leadership in the neighborhood, and that's helpful. So that most of our neighborhoods have an association of associations, to use the ABCD language. So somebody is convening whatever associations you have in the neighborhood. Sometimes, and this is the problem that we have, it's very sparse. We don't have a lot of associations in many of our neighborhoods. And so one of our goals is through a block level neighbor to neighbor inventory, we find new associations. So I would say that in many of our neighborhoods, when we do block level interviews with neighbors and ask them what they're interested in, I can tell you overwhelmingly, there will be a group that wants to garden together. They want to have some kind of community garden. Food is on the top of people's mind. Another thing that they're going to care about, especially during COVID times, is care for seniors. They're going to want to make sure that seniors who are shut in or isolated are looked after. So they'll have, so again, these are affinities within proximity. What do you care about within this proximity? Now, now ABCD generally, as John and Jody said in the Green Book, cared about troubled neighborhoods, and our innovation is that all neighborhoods are troubled, but the approach to every neighborhood is different than the typical troubled neighborhood. And so while we're not necessarily trying to create a vibrant economy as the starting point in our average neighborhoods, we're trying to create social capital or connection in our neighborhoods. We have a slightly different approach from now, and we would call that iteration abundant communities. And really, John and Peter articulated so much of the philosophy of what we're about in the book, The Abundant Community. So that's that. And then we said, John and Peter, can we work toward a methodology that would be so close to organic that it would be hard to contest, really? And so that's what we've done, and we call it the Abundant Community Initiative, and it's been adopted as Abundant Community. So this is, next slide. For some reason there it is. So we, this is that point person, party person, listener, a piece that we looked at, and we heard somebody yesterday, and then we have a support team. So the party person, so we have somebody on, just to review quickly, a person on every block that introduces themselves. Well, this is the organic part. What would you do if you were an open neighbor that cared about your neighbors? You'd introduce yourself. You'd maybe share food together or some kind of connection point, and you would talk to each other and ask each other questions. So that's what we're asking to happen on a block. So just introduce yourself. I just heard the other day, I was with a block connector in a neighborhood with a group of them, and the one said, when we moved to this neighborhood 20 years ago, an older gentleman came to my door and welcomed me and showed me a map of our block with everyone's name on it and asked if I would want my name on this as well and my phone number. And it was this overture of connection at the block level. So we have a very low bar for our neighboring relationships, really low. Introduce yourself, connect over food once a year or so, and listen to each other. But have a posture of neighboring. That's really what we're asking. Just have a posture of neighboring to create a vibe of connection on the block. This is our inventory card, ABCD inventory. It's quite truncated, and it's to help people connect. And this is where I was really trying to get to. So what are the supports that, so if you can see the red block connectors in a neighborhood of 1,000 homes, what we've discovered is that if you're going to create relationship at a neighborly relationship, 20 nearby neighbors are about as much as you can manage. And what I mean by that is I think just in the busyness of our lives, we don't get too far from our homes. From a phenomenological perspective, your neighborhood can just be the neighbors that live around you. We found that. Even pushing to 20 is quite a bit, but it still has a sense of connection, especially if your streets are laid out in blocks or your cul-de-sacs or your building floors. We also are mindful that 1 in 5 struggle with addictions or sexual abuse or mental illness. So 1 in 5. So in a block of 20, you're going to have quite a bit of mental illness, addictions, and lots of challenges on your block that'll emerge. And so that's more than enough. And so in a neighborhood of 1,000 homes, we're going to have approximately 40 block connectors. So that's a lot if it's 20 per 50 block connectors. So, and now I'm going to talk about the support that supports those block connectors. So let's take a minute and if you have any questions or thoughts that you want to ask. Anybody? Am I scratching where you're itching?
Go ahead.
Okay. So now in order to get these in our human scale neighborhoods, in order to identify these block connectors, where do we go? So usually in our neighborhoods, what happens is somebody hears about this idea of neighboring. Remember, they're hearing about neighboring. And we're really just working with the neighboring movement, and we may be igniting their imagination a little bit about what the future could look like if their neighborhood was connected. And so they come to us and say, I'm interested in this. What is it again? They don't really know. Our neighbor has it, or we've heard about it. We do, and we've really, we use a number of mechanisms to talk about neighboring in the city, and then we tell them, if you're interested in the notion of neighboring, be in touch with us. And then they get in touch. And so tomorrow afternoon, I will do creating a neighborly vibe seminar. And people sign up for creating a neighborly vibe seminar, and we walk them through what it takes in their neighborhood. And usually what we tell them is, wow, it's great that you're into this. Do you know anybody else in your neighborhood that's talking this way? That's a community building person in the neighborhood? And what we're doing is we're trying to create a support team, a little energy nucleus. And if we don't have that, we say, you know, let's just percolate it. Let's just wait. There's no hurry here. So talk it up in your neighborhood to see if other people want to be a part of a neighborliness initiative. And we use that kind of language. And so what we're trying to do is develop a support team. And then once the support team gets to a few people, or maybe they get a little excited and they want to do something, we say, well, why don't we try this on one of your blocks? Why don't you, as you're kind of the outgoing one on this support team that likes the neighborly idea, why don't we see if you can introduce yourself to all your people on the block? And during COVID times, we might say, do you have a contact list for your block? And they'll say no. We'll say, well, can we watch you create a contact list for your block? That would be cool. Tell us about your experience of, we'll actually go with you. And that's part of the fun, is going with people as they try to create a contact list for their block. And incidentally, we've found that a clump of neighbors wandering around a neighborhood is just fun. It's not threatening. It opens doors. It's the weirdest thing. And people join you. I don't know, it's like a roving party. Overwhelmingly, we found this to work. So anyways, we would support that one individual from the support team as they work toward experimenting with getting to know their neighbors and creating a contact list for their whole block. Now, if we're really keen, we might also say, let's do a block social too. So we're gonna, where we connect and say, we're trying to create a contact list for our block, but we'd also love to see a block social happen. And that block social is this Friday. So it's a social distance social, respecting COVID time. So we really send the message that we're aware of social distancing, and we're not dull to that. We're aware of it, and we're still going to have a social. So we're calling it a social distance social, and we're going to figure it out as a block, how to keep social distance. And the support team watches that happen, and we maybe take some pictures, we celebrate it. Now what we're going to do after we get a certain level of confidence is we're going to go to neighborhood leadership, the Association of Associations. We're going to say to them, hey, we're doing this neighborly thing in the neighborhood, and we want you to know about it and support it. Would you mind? And they would probably say yes. So there is neighborhood leadership, the Association of Association. Now, I don't know if you don't have that in your neighborhood, the question often is, what do you do? I don't know if that's a question that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what do you do if you live in a neighborhood that has an identity, it has a name maybe, and it has a sense of boundaries, and it maybe even has a center if you're so lucky, but it doesn't have leadership. But you want to do this initiative in your neighborhood. You think it would be good for your kids, it'd be good for the seniors. So what we do say, I haven't had to do this, but I have seen it done in places like Okotoks. You would convene your support team, and you would, by social media or by pamphlet or flyer, you would do a bit of a blitz. It doesn't even have to be a comprehensive blitz. You would say, we're having a Highlands neighbor meeting to talk about our well-being as a neighborhood. Come and join us on next Friday at 7 o'clock. So you put it out there to your residents who read it and say, well, that's cool, but I can't make it. I don't care about it. I do care about it. And then they come. And the reason why you would do that, to our thinking, is now you've convened a group of people, let's call them leaders, who care about this. You've laid out your agenda. We care. Now, if anybody says, who are you to lead this in the neighborhood, you say, well, we convened a meeting about it. And we're the leaders, because we showed up. And even if you wrote, minutes of it, just so that you have an accountability, you've communicated, you've created a democratic process where people can show up, and now you can move forward. Maybe that's, want to be clear about that. Does that make any sense? Does that maybe push back on it, or you need to?
No, that makes sense to me. I think I agree that I think having that kind of accountability, and for the block connectors' sake, when they go out and start talking to people, that's important. Absolutely, Julie.
Makes sense to me.
So now when a block connector goes to the door, they can actually say, our neighborhood is doing this neighborliness initiative, and they've asked if I'd be the block connector on our block. We're thinking we'd have a block party. Are you good with that? And the other area that I didn't mention yet is in short order, we want to start listening to people about their vision for our neighborhood, what interests they have that they'd want to share with neighbors, and what gifts, skills, abilities, or experiences they would be willing to contribute to the neighbor or the neighborhood. We say that very carefully, to the neighbor or the neighborhood, because we know that there's some skills and gifts that people want to contribute to the neighbor, but not the hood. And that would be, for instance, snow shoveling. I'm happy to shovel my neighbor's walks, but I will not shovel the neighborhood walks. So we really say that. We also still have to say this. This information that I'm gathering is for us as a block, but the neighborhood would like to know your answers too. So when you say, what's your vision for the neighborhood? Or what would you like to do with neighbors? If you say, I would like to sing in a choir, I'd like to sing, or I'd like to play hockey, you know that that has to go beyond our block to the neighborhood. So your imagination is that I'm going to join a hockey team of neighbors, or I'm going to join a choir in the neighborhood. So we have to say neighbor and neighborhood. Like in the same way we said your contribution has to be limited, so does that. And also your vision is a neighborhood vision. It's not just a block vision, it's a neighborhood vision. Now, the neighbor is going to say inevitably, there will be a random sampling of neighbors who would say something like this. Is this confidential? And even maybe it's a senior on your block that's been told by her daughter-in-law that she should not give any information out to anybody. Is this confidential? And you say, well, no, it's actually not confidential, but it's guarded carefully by our neighborhood. And so that's why we went back to the leadership thing. Why we formed leadership is because we have to have a body that stewards this information on behalf of the neighborhood. Incidentally, I can also say to that senior whose daughter-in-law told her not to give any information, it's so wonderful to be able to say, that's fine, Mildred. And when there's something up, I'll just come and tell you. We don't actually need your information because we have a relationship. So we're not sweating it. So now we have that information, and we actually have some databases that are awesome at collating that information and putting it to use to create new groups. So our goal is, we would love it as a goal to have neighbors who never were connected to a group called the block. This new thing is called a block, and they share what they share together is a postal code. They didn't ever share and were never together, but now they're together. That's our first group that we care about, and we believe it's very supportive. We want to create support in that thing. And then the other group, we would love somebody to connect with another group in the neighborhood, an affinity-based group, an affinity within the proximity. So we want our 10-year-old girls to meet another 10-year-old girl in the neighborhood. We want those that are interested in social justice to meet other people that are interested in social justice in the neighborhood, so that we as a neighborhood could take our share of responsibility for homelessness in the city. We want people to get out and walk, so we want them to find other people that want to walk. But we're going to find dog walking groups and all kinds of groups in the neighborhood. And so and then those groups have a kind of relatedness as well that produces a synergy, particularly when they meet together as an association, because those groups are all new associations, which many modern neighborhoods have no associations. Now we're forming associations, and then we bring those associations together, and they are the association of associations, which have an energy and an efficacy, a power to themselves that happens in the neighborhood. So any questions about any of that? Ramblings.
I have a question, Howard. When I've talked with you in the past, when I've heard you talk about this, you've talked about the idea of bringing all the connectors together. So each of these block connectors, bringing them together around a table. And the way I'd always visualized it is that those were the people, that was the sort of think tank that took all the data, or maybe it was the support team that was stewarding the data. But now it almost was sounding like it's the community league that is. Just so I can understand how it's working.
That's great question. So we do want to, the ongoing commitment to the block connectors is that they will be supported, for sure. So how do we support block connectors? We've seen when you ask the block connectors to come together, only a few of them will come together. Lots of them won't. So in a programmatic mindset that we had early days, we thought they would all come together, but they don't. So using good old ABCD, we have mini duck calls. So we're going to call them we've done many things to get them together. We'll have a virtual group that they can become a part of. We'll have a regional group, which works. So we'll say in the northwest corner of our neighborhood, 6 of you block connectors, why don't you get together and somebody from the support team will convene them. And they like that. So various ways of supporting the block connectors. It's definitely not linear. And the data, so with the information that people share, that is the purview of the support team. So the support team the support team holds it on behalf of neighborhood leadership. And this support team oftentimes will report to, or like in our structure, it's a little different because the neighborhood leadership is like an operational group within the neighborhood. I'm going to call it an operational group. So they care about street lights and kind of like an HOA, a bit operational. But the support team might be more of what you would call in a traditional society, the elders. They're asking the question, how are our children? How is our economy? How's our environment? How's our new moms? They're asking those questions, so those aren't operational. It seems like we've settled on thinking of the leadership as operational and the support team as elderish, and this whole mechanism like a traditional elder network. That makes sense? So it's not linear, it's gotten less linear over time, but so I think what you said, Julie, how do you find new groups? If you find 5 people that want to bike ride, and then in your neighborhood newsletter or on nextdoor.com, you guys have that, which sometimes gets too big, beyond human scale, or in some kind of other Facebook for the neighborhood, and you say, hey, we have a walking group going, and you have 5 people on it, feel free to join at 7 o'clock or join this group virtually, then that group will grow. And so you're creating more people in that particular group. Or that group might split off and there's bushwalking group and street walking group, who knows? So it's an ongoing process, like a family of forming new groups and new interests, and you just keep nurturing it, but you're creating an environment where the formation of groups you've got mechanisms for the formation of new groups. And when I say mechanisms, you might even need to insure a new group. So somewhere, somebody's got to cover insurance, which we think about. So if you have a hockey group, they probably will need to be insured. You couldn't even get ice time unless you insured them. So you have to have some agent that is the responsible agent, and that would be your neighborhood leadership. Which for us isn't a problem, but for new neighborhoods, it is a bit of a problem over time because they need to constitute under the Societies Act. All right, so that's some of that stuff. Now you see in the center, we have a neighborhood connector. This, Julie, the early days, this person was most often paid. We're finding it at about 50-50 now, where neighborhoods are willing to go a little slower. They still might have a neighborhood connector who's the shining light in the support team and has some extra hours that they can give or is extra passionate. And so the neighborhood connector, and I love what John calls them, block connector finder. You have to have somebody that really is willing, the adventurous type, is willing to go out and be the block connector finder. And so we definitely have those individuals in every neighborhood. Some are paid, some not paid. And they are from inside the neighborhood.
Howard, can I ask this? We had scheduled this for about an hour. We can proceed with this at the same time. I think it might be useful to hear what you've learned about how this kind of an initiative can be introduced to, sold to a city government in terms of their support, or other not-for-profits, for instance? What are the self-interests that you can see now that you're in government, that government has in seeing this happen? How do you sell it if you're on the outside, right? What are and when you're inside, what can you see is the benefit to the city of now having recognized and formed a non-invasive support system?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, there's lots to say about that. But in a way, yeah, John, the dream is that the municipality comes on side with it. And so this slide actually, which is contact information, I love it, right? Abundant Community. So this is the book that John and Peter wrote at edmonton.ca. It actually has a domain space within the city's government. It has the city's logo. It's funded by the city, but somehow the city is very hands-off. It recognizes from the beginning that this is built on citizen practice. So the benefit, the biggest selling point to the city is that they get all of those benefits that we looked at in the beginning, in the early, wow. Right now, the city is concerned about senior care. Where is it? So senior care. And the city worked with the benefits of neighboring document. They said, yeah, they helped to create this with citizens. A disaster preparedness plan. So Cupertino, California has a disaster plan, which is basically get to know your neighbors. And then they prep them with some disaster materials. But now they really have even backed off to just say, just get to know your neighbors. That's a starting place. Lots of research is coming out around homelessness and the housing first model. The fifth principle is get to know the neighbors. The homeless person, the newly needs to be integrated into the life of the neighborhood. They don't need to be ghettoized in a 15-suite homelessness building. They're actually, you know, housing first is saying we need to get them integrated into the life of the neighborhood. So that would be a benefit. And like I mentioned, disaster preparedness, child maltreatment, senior care. Thanks to the Village Effect and Susan Pinkert's book, people are even, and even our statistics on personal physical health and connection to relationships is taking a huge, coming to the forefront for the municipal benefit. So there's just so many that when we get to, especially when you get to city council, a city council which sees all of these as important, and community development is the boat that floats all of these special interests. We also have a slide that we use where we say, while all of the special interests are important, whether that's homelessness, addictions, senior well-being, children, when we look at that productive unit of the city, while it's important to come from the angle of those services or those particular interests, when we turn it around and we divide the city up in neighborhoods, we see people more holistically, where we see a senior who is isolated with addictions living next to a child. We see them in a more comprehensive way, and this might be a better way to approach our programming. And so it's been a pretty easy case to make, I think, as we've moved our way through municipalities. I can tell you that there has been a few agencies that have worked with municipalities to make this happen in their cities. Is that helpful?
Yeah. Howard, also, when you say the city supports the initiative, could you describe what support means practically? Is it the money? Is it the personnel? Is it materials? What does support mean?
Yeah, so at one level, at the most direct level, support means a $500,000 budget for this initiative. So that's kind of direct. So that hires me and Wendy and Deborah and various others. Okay, and that's good. But it also, a huge transition has been our whole, what used to be, and I called it the community services department, has now been transitioned to the neighborhood services department. And we now look at all of our programming through an ABC lens. So everything is run through an ABC lens. The city, yeah, so that would be a part of it. Now, once we run all of our programs through an ABCD lens, now we start to infect strategic planning on the part of the city with ABCD thinking. So now they're starting the strategic planning in the 50-year plan for our city. What will we be like? Talks about neighborhoods, talks about the gifts of people, talks about sense of community index. It starts to use that language. When we, you know, we're tonight actually we'll be showing the video or the film, the documentary, The Great Disconnect. And our head of urban planning will be on that and talking about how neighborhoods and connecting at the neighborhood level is so important in a world of disconnection. So that it'll be amazing. They're actually going to, you know, we draw them into saying, having a conversation about the importance of neighborhood. So we get the leadership of the city says it.
Any other questions? I think we've reached our hour.
Yeah, I have one question. Patrick Casey here from Historic Central Neighborhood, Appleton. I just have a question about how do you handle neighbors that want to use the neighborhood association for political purposes?
Well, again, so the biggest, going back to scale, this is also similar to nextdoor.com. Anything that moves the neighborhood beyond the village size or the neighborhood, the human scale size, the larger it gets, the more it will be exploited by special interests or you know, agencies. I love, you know, even Peter. I mean, exploitation can come from many areas, and political exploitation can be one, but there's many exploitations, and the scale really helps to keep that under control, where you have to own your voice. So if you're being an idiot, you're an idiot on a block within the neighborhood, and you're a known character. That accountability is profound. I have seen that time and time again. But if you let the scale get too large, you're going to become, so there will be political interest, but also agency interest. The agency industrial complex will come in and feed off your neighborhood. And this is where Peter was, you know, I love it in community building structures of belonging, where he says, it is a misuse of power to take a responsibility that's not your own. So whose responsibility is the raising of children? It's not the schools, it's the neighborhoods, it's the village. So it is a misuse of power to just come in and storm our neighborhood and take all our kids, figuratively speaking. But in the same way, seniors that are isolated are not your problem, they're our problem. Those seniors have a name and they're our responsibility. So if you come in as a seniors organization and take our responsibility, that is a misuse of your power. So you need to start by working with us and saying, how are you doing with your seniors? We've heard that there's some that are isolated, and we can say, oh my goodness, yes, I guess there are. Let's correct that. And we might, and we'll figure it out. And we may have to call you for help. So again, that's all boils back to that scale. And Emily Talon's book is a great book to curb the scale. But it's a big job. And I think that this is a culture shift to return to definable, human scale, centered, led neighborhoods. It's a complementary matter for us as we do ABCD, and we need to. I think we need to be vigilant. Don't let it off the hook.
Howard, say again the book that talks about neighborhood scale.
Well, Emily Talon's book, Neighborhood is good.
Neighborhood is what?
This one, Neighborhood by Emily Talon.
You said the book that had that focused on the importance of scale.
Yeah, well, Human Scale by Kirkpatrick Sale is a good one.
Oh.
So there's a book, Human Scale.
Yes.
And it's almost hard to introduce because of the author's name rhymes with the title. Human Scale by Kirkpatrick Sale.
Yes.
So that's one. I think there's a number of others. So Robin Dunbar's work on Dunbar, they famously call it Dunbar's number, but he talks about the size of the human cortex and our ability to be in a relationship. Now we don't talk about the kind of relationship that he's talking about. This goes back to family, friends, and neighbors. Robin Dunbar is talking about neighbor relationships because in the primal human development, we were neighbors. That was fundamental to who we are. Our cerebral cortexes are wired not for community, but for neighborhood. Yeah. So again, we can be co-opted by that word community because we love to, because we want friends, because we're addicted to friendship. Yeah. We're not addicted to neighborship because it's hard. People say to me, they go, oh, I hate my neighbor. And I say to them, yeah, well, you probably have an Uncle Bob that you hate too. Like, it's just the nature of relationships. They're not always going to be easy, except for friendships. Because if you don't hate a friend because you just ditch them, that's the convenience of the neighbor or the friendship relationship. It's arbitrary. Anyways, I can go on about that.
Right. Well, a lot of wisdom. We really appreciate your sharing all of this with us. And we can go to your website and see a lot of materials that you've referenced here, including that very simple card that you use when a connector goes and interviews somebody in a house. To find out about them, to get things started, I want to commend that especially as useful and experienced tool that you have developed. So our time is up. There are still, I'm sure, many more things we could learn in the future. And I think most of it one can find on the Abundant Community Initiative website and the ABCD Institute website. Glad to have everybody who's joined us, and perhaps we'll talk again. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for